Welcome to Season 3 of Galaxy Tenants. On today's episode, we head to Tulum, Mexico for a conversation with Andy Owens, or Fixer, the camp lead for Rootpile, and we feature his songs Kerosene Circuit and Jalapeno Flashback.
How are you, Andy?
I'm doing good.
Wonderful.
How you doing up there?
We are good up here. I'm in Denver, Colorado, and it's actually pretty nice out. It could be worse. But you're in Tulum, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm in Tulum, Mexico. I usually spend the winters down here from basically November to April, pretty much.
Wow, I'm jealous.
Diver, I do a lot of scuba diving in caves, so that's why we come down for that.
Oh, that's incredible. I'm actually listening to a book on tape right now, or an audio book about caving and some of the deepest caves in the world. It's super fascinating to me, but I'm claustrophobic, so that would be a fucking nightmare. Let's start with bluegrass music, because I feel like that's going to be the root of this conversation. When did you start playing, Andy?
I started playing in about 1974, 75, something like that. Started playing initially banjo, and then kind of branched out to playing all the bluegrass instruments, mandolin, guitar, fiddle, some dobro, bass. And then eventually, branched out into other kinds of music, here and there. And so I play some keys and electric guitar, and also mandocello, mandolin, mandola, all the strings pretty much.
Yeah, I've taken a similar approach to instrumentation. If it has strings on it, I can likely figure it out. I play banjo, guitar, lap steel, sitar, and I find there's such a cool connection between almost all stringed instruments. It's just a matter of getting yourself kind of oriented to the notes themselves.
Yeah, I was pretty much initially drawn to banjo. I had friends that kind of played, and so started playing banjo, and then ended up playing in bands in college. And I was a banjo player. I mean, I was a banjo major in college, but they didn't know that. Now you could actually be a banjo major in college. My son actually was a mandolin major at the ETSU in Eastern Tennessee State University Bluegrass program, but back then, you just played banjo and didn't go to class, and that's how you were a banjo major. But
right, it didn't come with the paperwork.
So I've had my own bands, played in a lot of different bands, played in, some fairly well-known bands in Texas mostly. And then I've pretty much been doing my own band for, 30 years more or less. So 5 or 6 solo CDs, played in 52 countries, produced lots of records. Active in the IBMA, which is International Bluegrass Music Association, which is like the CMA is for country music. IBMA is for bluegrass music. I was chair of the board for that. I was on that board for 7 years and chair of the board for 4 years.
Let me ask you a quick question in that realm. In what I do, I throw music festivals and I book concerts and I work with bands. And I'm friends with some of the guys from the infamous String Dusters, Green Sky Bluegrass, Leftover Salmon. And what those guys do relative to the traditional aspect of the music is very different because of their progressive approach. What originally got me into bluegrass was Yonder Mountain String Band. They pulled me from jam band kind of into more of the bluegrass realm, and then I found Del McCoury and then all of the classics, of course. But I guess what I would ask you is, where do you feel that progressive bluegrass music fits in the future of bluegrass? Because I know the IBMAs have been discouraging in the past towards progressive music, though that seems to be changing. I'd just be curious as to your perspective on where progressive music fits into the genre.
Well, there's probably way more people that would say that the IBMA stance on progressive, quote unquote, bluegrass music is there'll be way more people that say that their stance is way more open than they feel it should be than would be the other way around. I think that IBMA is actually, I think that's kind of a fallacy, to tell you the truth, because it's always been pretty open. The thing is, you're either a bluegrass band or you ain't. You is or you ain't. you can't really say that String Cheese is a bluegrass band. I mean, of course, I've been following them their whole career, and I know those guys, but you can't really say that they're a bluegrass band to me. I mean, they have bluegrass influences, not any more than you could say Railroad Earth is a bluegrass band.
Right. In my opinion, both of those are jam bands that play some bluegrass.
Yeah. So I think that bluegrass is pretty healthy, I think. I've been out of the IBMA scene for quite a while, but bluegrass is pretty healthy. I mean, right now there's so many young kids playing that it's actually kind of annoying how good they are, And I mean, I'm 66, so I started playing music in 75, and we had nothing. I don't know when you started playing banjo, but when I started playing banjo, all there was the Earl Scruggs book, and probably about 20% of the tabs in there weren't even correct. And so, we didn't have what they have now, which is literally hundreds and hundreds of options for learning to play, hundreds of books, hundreds of videos, hundreds of online sources. So they better be good. And the other thing is they also have incredibly better access to good instruments. We started playing in the 70s. You could find maybe a good Gibson or a really crappy Japanese banjo, or you could, of course, back then, a 50s or 60s Martin was more affordable guitar. But the instruments now, there must be 100 great mandolin makers now. So having a really good mandolin is easy now compared to what it was then. So I'm mainly a mandolin player over the years, because it just really was the way I wanted to front a band. And it's not many people who front a band singing lead and playing banjo, But gosh, back in the 70s, you're lucky to find any decent mandolin. You could just barely even play, So that has a big impact on how good they are too, I think. So it's just the people that, I don't want to say try to control, but feel afraid of the change in what bluegrass is or what it might become is somewhat valid in a way, because bluegrass is basically a genre of music where it started out with banjo, mandolin, guitar, fiddle, and bass, and then dobro. And if you branch much further than that, I think there is a valid question of, are you playing bluegrass? You can have different ideas of material and how you address, we're singing about the cabin, or we're singing about the war in Ukraine, or whatever, But at some point, if you stray too far from that, then you really aren't playing bluegrass in a way.
Let me ask you this. If you're using that traditional lineup of instruments that you just mentioned, but if the actual notation and the actual music itself has become more progressive, and maybe it's classical grass, maybe it's outside of the realm of just the standard bluegrass genre, does that fit? Is that bluegrass music in your opinion?
Well, the funny thing is, okay, so I mean, I started listening to bluegrass and playing bluegrass in 1975. In 1975, the Country Gentlemen were as progressive as it could possibly get. I mean, Newgrass Revival was as progressive as it could possibly get, and so now people consider that traditional bluegrass music. So the reality is that it's all in the eye of the beholder, and then at the same time, there are people who will say, oh, if you plug in, you ain't playing bluegrass, and then there'll people say, if you add drums, you ain't playing bluegrass. Well, to me, more like if you add saxophone and pedal steel and drums and keyboards, are you playing bluegrass? So I'm not saying this is my opinion. I'm just saying in general, when you think about it, because, for example, there are a lot of groundbreaking barriers have been broken, right? I mean, but if you were going to play traditional jazz, and you stuck a heavy metal guitar in there and said it was traditional jazz, well, people will think you're a freaking lunatic because it just ain't, you know? So, but then you also have the difference of like some of the acts you mentioned, for example, string dusters. Well, people will say string dusters are progressive, but the reality is string dusters is dobro, fiddle, banjo, guitar, and bass. And there's nothing really progressive about that except their style. And their style is somewhat progressive. Now, I haven't seen them in a while. Maybe they've changed, but their style is somewhat progressive because of the way they sing and the way they play. But that's still a bluegrass band. Nobody could say that's not a bluegrass band. A lot of their style is a little more progressive, but Green Sky's the same. I think it would be good to look at other analogies. I think, like, is Bela Fleck and the Flecktones bluegrass? No, not even, you know?
Jazz.
Yeah. So that's cool, you know? That's no problem. He's just using banjo. There was banjo and jazz long before there was banjo and bluegrass. So I think the fear that people have of the music getting too diluted is a valid fear.
I appreciate that perspective because so often I hear the other side of that with all these hippie jam bands that I play bluegrass music that I hang out with and all these folks that I know that, you know, they maybe don't feel included. So I can totally see how the integrity of the genre as far as what it is or should be in the future still has to have its roots.
What is it that they don't feel included in, you know? Like, because in the 70s, bluegrass festivals were on a trailer in the middle of a swamp somewhere in Louisiana where we would go, and it was bluegrass. That was it, period. Now, a true bluegrass festival in that sense doesn't even exist anymore. So to me, sometimes it's frustrating to me that people want to be able to, maybe this is going to sound close-minded, but they want to be able to ride on the train of whatever current upsurge in the popularity of bluegrass is, but they don't play bluegrass, you know? I mean, the same thing happened in the 80s when a lot of old-time bands started edging their way into the bluegrass scene and getting bookings that a lot of bluegrass bands could have had. And those people were the ones feeling left out because, like, hey, we've been playing bluegrass our whole life. Now they're putting jam bands and old-time bands on bluegrass festivals. You know, so it's just much broader than it used to be. That's all. Like I said, Country Gentleman was progressive as it could get. And people were just like, that ain't bluegrass, you know. Now Sam Bush is the king of bluegrass. Sam's a good friend of mine. I've known him for 50 years, you know. So, I mean, anybody can do whatever they want as far as I'm concerned. So
sure. Sam is great, by the way. I've worked with him a few times. Every single show that I've booked him and brought him to Colorado, he's sold out. And he's just top notch as far as a human being.
He's the man.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of Sam. I told him this the other day. I'm just so proud that you've continued to stay with it, keep pushing and keep going and keep growing and keep having this career. You know, it's just amazing.
I think Sam and Lynn would both like Burning Man quite a bit.
I think they would too, actually.
All right. So let's jump into that because this is why I'm having you on here because I'm extremely curious. There's so much going on in the Burning Man world right now. But I want to start with how you found Burning Man. How did you come upon this chaos?
I had a farm in North Carolina, and I wanted to do some events. I had friends that did like kind of singer-songwriter retreat camp out weekends and things like that. And I wanted to do some events on my land, but I really didn't have the budget to do them. And so when I was kind of searching around and thinking and whatever, I just stumbled into the fact that there's a lot of volunteer-based, non-commercial, non-commodified events out there that are much more volunteer-based in their workload, you know, in their workforce, let's just say. And so there were some events in North Carolina that I can't name, they're actually that secret, that were volunteer-based and non-commodified, basically, other than buying tickets. And so the whole volunteer workforce was what made the event happen. And then, so at the same time, the same people who turned me on to that were also interested in burns. So I went to a couple of regional burns, Alchemy, and I think Alchemy was the first one, probably. Alchemy and Euphoria used to be the same crew and the same place over in North Georgia. And I got there and I realized, oh, these are my people. Same thing so many people say. Holy cow, these are my people. And so wow, I love this event. I love the art. I love the fact that there's people here that are like me who can fix anything, can do anything, can just take a giant pile of whatever and turn it into something, which is the way I've pretty much been my whole life. So I thought, yeah, I love this, but there's nothing here for me. I hated the music. I still hate the music. I'm sorry, but I hate EMD.
EDM.
No, it's EMD. Electromaniacal diarrhea. I can't stand it. I freaking hate it. And everybody knows this. I've held back for so many years, but I hate it.
Just real quick, let's not gloss over that. Why do you hate it?
That's a good point. I'm glad you asked the question.
Let's have the conversation.
Good. I don't particularly hate the actual music, although I do find it very boring. I find it not very creative. And I feel like, and I know I'm wrong about this in some ways, I feel like that it's very frustrating to me as a person who spent their whole life, spent 50 years trying to learn how to play music, that there are people that can literally go spend $600 or $800 on a deck or whatever they call it and go buy a bunch of sounds and just mix them together and then stand in front of a crowd and make $20,000 a show. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's fair. I think it's stupid. And the other thing I don't like about it is that I've been destroyed by it too many times. It's like EMD PTSD, right? Because to weave this into the story, okay, I started going to Burns and I was like, these are my people, but there's no live music here. And there's sure as hell no bluegrass music here. So I went from 2 people, me and a hippie chick, to, in about 5 years going to regionals, to a 75-person music and sound camp with live bluegrass music, pro bluegrass musicians, barbecue and moonshine, and one of the biggest and best camps at most of the regionals we went to. But quite often we would be placed next to camps that weren't sound camps, and placement knew that we were an acoustic music camp and try to place us such that we wouldn't be destroyed. And we would get put next to people that would just, with no permission from placement and no concern for their neighbors at all, play loud as hell EMD music 24 hours a day. I mean, to the level that I would kill myself to get 8 or 10 pro musicians there, bring a stage, set up a whole camp, feed hundreds and hundreds of pounds of barbecue, and then we'll be right next door or surrounded by camps that weren't even sound camps that just blasted EMD as loud as he possibly could, to the point that we couldn't even have, not only could we not sit around and have an acoustic jam session, we couldn't even hear ourselves on stage. So I feel that at the same time, that kind of thing has happened so many times to me. And what I don't understand is that in typical music, you're a musician, lifelong musician too, in typical music circles of musicians, right? People have ethics as far as, oh, please turn down, you're playing too loud, you're playing over me. People have concern for each other. In the EMD world, I don't see it happening. Too often I see people that are not really, they have no concern. We went to Renegade Burn last year, and we were right next to a camp that never stopped playing. Their DJs would play 2 hours at a time, as loud as they possibly could play. And actually, we went to another burn before that, which was a smaller burn. And we went to a lot of effort to bring a lot of stuff to this burn. Brought a huge kitchen. We brought shade. We brought stage, just to try to help them out. Somebody pulled in right next to us and played 120 dB crappy house music the whole weekend. And so it destroyed us. And you go talk to them, we're like, oh no, man, it's a burn. Just live with it. And so the lack of concern to me from typical EMD DJs is what makes me really not like the music too. It's not just the music, I mean, because I know I'll go in some of the Burning Man social media groups and joke about this and stuff. And there'll people that'll come in and say, hey, man, I've spent 10 years learning how to make sounds. I got a whole wall of synthesizers, blah, 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 blah. So that's fine. You know, that's cool. But the reason I think EDM music is fake, and you tell me what you think, I never hear a mistake, right? Do you ever hear a mistake?
I have. I've heard bad mixing where it's just like the beats are off or something, but I agree with most of what you said. I'll say that. That said, we sound like a couple of old men saying, stay off our fucking grass.
That's okay.
No, I'm good with it.
That's why the grass is still fucking green.
I hear you, and I can totally appreciate that. So I'm a glutton for punishment, and because I feel similarly about EDM music and how it's utilized and overutilized at the Burn, that I actually forced myself into hosting a near weekly radio show of EDM music. And through this process, I have found 95% trash. But the 5% that I have found that is well orchestrated and has really creative output, though it's hard to find, is really beautiful stuff. And I've really enjoyed it. But that's really what drew me to your camp initially at Burning Man. And same with Playa Jazz Cafe, which a few years back, you guys were right across the street from each other. And I spent most of my Burn right the fuck there. I mean, it was incredible.
Cramp too, you know, they're always right in the same neighborhood with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I wanted to bring true bluegrass to Burns. So we did. And then I'm kind of a type A, to continue with the story, I'm kind of a type A person, and I tend to get over involved, maybe. So next thing you know, I'm team leads at Burns and regionals, and I'm, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then you look behind the curtain and you're like, this isn't what I thought it was. Now, a lot of it is what you thought it was. Incredible people doing incredible things, just to synopsize it, right? So then in 2012, I went to, or 11, I guess it was. Anyway, I went to the Big Burn for the first time. And I got there and I realized, wow, it's kind of the same. There's a little bit of live music here, but not much. And I realized that to go from North Carolina to Empire, and I did a few years try to do both. Nightmare. I mean, driving U-Hauls, not having the money to even get a hotel room across the country. I mean, just incredibly hard to do, right? Spent every penny I had. I've always spent every penny I had on Rootpile, always. And so, stupid, lost everything. But we did it, you know. And so I wanted to bring something different to the Burn, which I think is important, you know. And now there's all this push for diversity. And what I try to tell people is we have lots of diversity in our camp. You don't need to lecture me on diversity. We have every gender. We have every kind of person. We have young. We have old. We have every person in the alphabet and every color represented. The diversity we bring is diversity that you need. That you need, Burning Man. You need to see that not all Southern people are redneck racists. Not all banjo players are toothless hillbillies.
A lot of them are, though.
Yeah, me and you, but, you know. And so, to me, that's the diversity that we bring, right? Now, in this woke world we live in today, but I'm old enough now, I don't care.
I've been in your camp several times. It's a very diverse group of people, and a lot of times it pulls people in who may not necessarily think it's diverse, who come from different backgrounds, and they come in out of the curiosity of wondering what they're hearing on a banjo, and they peek their heads in, and it just draws a bunch of people in, as live music always does, of all sorts. And I think what you guys bring to the Burn itself is extremely diverse, just in the fact that it's a live music camp. We need more live music at the Burn, flat out.
That's for sure. And, you know, with regard to that, and this is not a problem with EDM, this is just the nature of it, that it's way easier to bring some guy that they can all play on the same deck, and one dude just gets up there and plays for an hour. Now, you know, I'm bullshitting you, but plays the same song for an hour. And that's what, believe me, it's way easier than bring 10 or 15 pro bluegrass musicians to Burning Man. Believe me.
I don't think Burning Man needs any more EDM
I think that's
music.
part of the reason that it's omnipresent. Burning Man, it's just easy, right?
Sure. It's now embedded in the culture.
I'm all for that. I'm all for experimental type stuff. I've done a lot of looping. I spent 5 years doing almost nothing but looping. I have a huge looping rig, and someday I'm going to take over the EMD world with bluegrass.
Sister, rock the baby, mama, put on your calico blouse. There's something bigger happening at the Coker Creek Schoolhouse. You've seen them on the poster in front of Callie's store, and today I heard them playing through a crack in the hotel door. Well, the big man played the mandolin and the little one played the bass, and that boy from Carolina picked the banjo with such grace. And they held it together with a guitar and they sang such harmonies. When I heard that soul-struck fiddle, man, it changed the world for me. They rode the kerosene circuit, it's been some years ago, since the day I heard their music and came to love it so. And it was pure country magic, the four-quarter you could see, in a one-room schoolhouse, no electricity. Side by a sign advertising Kate's. It was blue and brown with the back road dust and it had Kentucky plates. I could see that the dank from Dixie cups and the back seat was a bed. A little smoke crept up from under the hood and the tires blew on tread. Well, they played a tune called Wheel Horse and one about Jenny Lind. And my knees got weak and shaky on Kentucky mandolin. And I just didn't understand it, Lord, it made no sense at all, 'cause these old boys should be living high and playing Carnegie Hall. They rode the kerosene circuit, it's been some years ago, since the day I heard their music and came to love it so. And it was pure country magic, the four-quarter you could see, in a one-room schoolhouse, no electricity. In a one-room schoolhouse, no electricity.
I want to talk about Rootpile. In looking at the website, you got, not only is it so well laid out and so detailed, I mean, if there's any questions, it just feels so approachable and everything is just transparent. Here's what we expect. Here's our application. Here's what we do. Here's how we approach it. It's really impressive, as is the physical camp itself, which is just massive, and all the different spaces for the workshops and the performance space. It's extremely impressive, and for me, I view it as a staple of my burn experience. Here's what I would ask you. Yeah, of course. Thank you, actually. Thank you for everything.
Sure.
In the chaos that is the 2022 Burning Man ticket release and general on sale, steward sale, all of that, how did your camp fare? And I'm hearing from a lot of camps that they don't have the amount of tickets to give to the folks that they would need to create their space and their experience that they have created year after year. I'm just wondering how you guys have fared through all of this and what you think the 2022 burn is going to look like for Rootpile.
Well, my view on all this is that we kick ass, we will continue to kick ass. And there's different kind of camps, you know. There are camps at Burning Man who are a group of people that want to go camping in the desert and want to go to Burning Man. So they're an already existing group, let's just say, of 20 people or whatever, 30 people. And they say, we want to go to Burning Man. Well, if we want to have a good location, then we need to get placed and we need to have a camp. And then so they come up with a shared mission among that group of people, right? Rootpile, on the other hand, is initially my vision, and I've worked incessantly for over 15 years of almost, including regionals, to try to make it happen. So it's a different thing. So, you'll see camps fail on Playa, I think, because the leadership gets burnt out. They burn out, they fall by the wayside, they lose their momentum, they lose their vision, and it dies. Well, with our camp, my vision has never wavered. And there will be people within my circle that will say, you're never going to stop. You're going to, you're going to have a spaceship shoot off from Rootpile with a banjo on the side. You're never going to give up. Well, it looks that way. But I really kind of have a vision of what the infrastructure should be. And it takes a lot of people and a lot of work to do what we do, as you've seen the different things we do, which is like daily workshops on 60 instruments that we bring, Bluegrass Museum, food and live concerts every night, 2 art cars, both that take people around and also have live and recorded music on them. And we've been lucky enough that even though I'm probably one of the most vocal bitchers about the org, I don't know, I guess they still like me because they like what we do, I guess. And it takes a lot of people and a lot of work to run what we do. It takes about 120 2-hour shifts every day is what we expect of everyone. And then another probably 10 or 15 musicians that work 4 to 6 hours a day. And then 10 or 12 team leads that might work for them probably. So it takes a lot of people. But, we've been lucky enough to have our DGS allotment really basically covers our core group that we really, my musicians, my electricians, the core people that I really have to have. So typically in past years, just through networking and a lot of focus and concentration, we've always been able to get enough tickets amongst ourselves to make it happen. But this year, as everyone else is, they've kind of juggled. The org has, in their infinite wisdom, decided to juggle when tickets are coming available. So instead of having 25,000, let's just say 20 or whatever it used to be, 20 or 25,000 tickets available, in the main sale, there was only 10, and we don't really even know how many of those were used for, maybe the early reservations from COVID and all that. So we don't really know. But people are hurting bad. And a lot of camps, I don't know how they're going to survive. Personally, it's uncommon for me to agree with anything that the org does, but I think that personally it doesn't bother me, because usually what a lot of us do is, as a camp, you either have all the people you need or all the ticket you need, and those people are going to be the ones who are almost always there. You don't have a lot of attrition. You don't have a lot of new people, right? We are usually able to find enough tickets for everyone that needs tickets, and due to that, we often are able to go to people we need and say, I need an electrician, I need a fiddle player, I need a plumber, I need a great manager, whatever it is. I need an R-car driver, I need a CDL driver, and say, I have you a ticket because this dude got 2, right? Whatever. But now it's not going to happen. It's just flat out not going to happen because of the timing of when they're going to release all the other tickets. They're releasing the same amount of tickets, but population is still going to be 80. But a lot of these tickets are not going to be released up until July and August. So there are going to be a lot of camps that just fail, I think, unfortunately. But as far as I'm concerned, I have my core covered already. I have enough people for my core. And I feel like what's going to happen, and what I know that we're going to do, is we're just going to add people to camp that already have tickets. And so that's just the only way we're going to be able to fill out the population we need to do it, because, placement and the org has been saying, oh, cut back. Well, you can't cut. You've seen my camp. How am I going to cut back? I can't bring half that camp.
It's
impossible.
huge. It's huge, and every aspect of it is kind of needed in an important part of the camp.
Right. I can't pull off my interaction. And the reason there are people that say, oh, you're plug and play, you got showers. I have showers built into a 45-year-old semi-trailer that used to haul elephants for the circus. The roof is falling in. I mean, it's hilarious that people will say that, oh, you're plug and play. I'm like, no. What I've had to do and tried to do and felt like made sense was arrange the infrastructure so that my people can work but still enjoy the burn. My people can work and make our mission happen. They can still enjoy the burn, but they're not having to bring their own shade. They're not having to bring their own water. It's co-opt self-reliance within the camp, which I really feel like the org is losing sight of now in their quest, and rightly so, to kill out true plug and play, right? I agree on that quest, but I think that the collateral damage is pretty huge right now when they're doing things like saying you can't drive an RV in for your campmate, which is one of their new rules. So that's impossible. There has to be shared self-reliance within a camp and shared infrastructure, right? How else can you do it at the level we do?
There's also a big difference between a plug and play camp that basically people are paying a premium for on top of their tickets to basically have ice sculptures and water fountains and private chefs, and they output nothing as a camp for the rest of the community. Where your camp, there's some minor fucking conveniences for folks. That's not, and you guys are outputting so much for the community. That is not a plug and play.
No. And I'll tell you the truth, I wouldn't care if a camp charged $30,000 per member if the offering, the interactivity, like you just said, I agree with you completely, the gifting and the interactivity, the outward interactivity and gifting of the camp is commensurate with what they're doing. I don't even care. You charge $35,000 for your members, well, you better fricking be serving lobster to 500 people then.
Just going to say there better be some sushi dinner going on. Instead, a lot of those camps park their RVs and they orient the camp in a way that's very closed off. And they'll even have somebody there that kind of maintains the camp to make sure that no outsiders wander in, which I don't even know how that's been allowed for as long as it has at Black Rock City. It's bizarre.
Oh, sure you do. Surely you do.
All right. I do know why it's been. And in fact, we know to the point where it seems like some of the folks who were involved in the org were directly involved in some of those plug and play camps. So not only did it seem like the org overlooked it, but the org was actively involved in it in some capacity, it seemed.
Well, there's a lot of money floating around, right? And I got no problem. I don't care. If Google wants to have a giant camp with 20 $500,000 RVs and they don't do anything outward for gifting and activity, but they gave $1 million for some art project, that's cool. But don't throw me out. Don't tell me that I can't drive some old lady's RV in when you're pushing for the new hubs thing and you're pushing for sustainability and self-reliance. And I can't have one of my guys help my old hillbilly lady breakfast cook bring in her RV. That's just shared self-reliance, that's shared infrastructure.
How are they going to oversee that? Really? I mean, how are they going to know who's driving in with what? That's a
they're
fucking
gonna.
threat. I'll trade you a 2-hour volunteer shift for a 2-minute shower.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how they're going to do it either. But the thing is, it's not a matter of whether they're going to do it. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of whether they're going to throw the rules out there and uproot and cause all this consternation and stress and planning that didn't need to happen and then just not enforce it. Just put out your rules like in January. Let us plan our camps, decide if we really want to take all those DGS tickets, decide if we really want to collect all these dues, and then decide if we really want to do a camp, and then do it. Do your placement application. Instead, they flip it all backwards, and they put a bunch of new rules in the placement application, right? And then all of a sudden, you're already committed. You've already paid for all your DGS. I got people from like 10 countries already bought plane tickets. I mean, then they'll pop up a new rule in there, and I'm like, crap, I don't know how to run my camp now. So give us a set of rules. Follow them yourselves, Marion.
Realistically, do you ever see the org following their own rules completely? Do you ever see that as even like a possibility?
okay, they have done skits and they've done all kinds of pressure saying that tickets cannot be transactional. Okay. So like if I need a CDL driver to drive stuff from Reno and I say, okay, if you'll come on and do all this, we'll find you a ticket and we'll give you a ticket and we won't charge you camp dues, but we're going to expect you to work like 3 or 4 days before build. And then during all of build, we need you driving, working. And I'm admonished and possibly lose my placement if I give that guy a ticket. I cannot pay anyone. I don't want to pay anyone. And I don't want to give anyone a ticket. And I never do. We find scholarships for our musicians. That's about the level. That's about the only thing we ever do. And those are scholarships paid by other people in camp. It's not the camp buying someone a ticket. But at the same time, if you work at the airport, you get a free ticket. And the airport is a money-making endeavor for the org somehow, as is Health Station. You work at Health Station, you get a free ticket. If you ranger a certain amount of hours, I think it's like 30 or something, you get a free ticket. And if you work making coffee at center camp that they're charging money for, you get a free ticket. So how is that? I don't know. You tell me. It doesn't make sense to me.
I heard they're getting rid of the coffee at center camp.
They did.
Mm-hmm.
They got rid of it.
So, I mean, you're talking about an org that charges an exorbitant amount for tickets, which isn't very inclusive for folks. And then on top of that, last year, the org charged for access to tickets, which is fucking crazy.
I don't know what you mean about that.
There was some deal where you could pay, I don't know how much it was. Maybe I want to say it was like $2,500 or something, or $1,500. I'm not sure. I shouldn't even say.
Yeah,
they had a certain amount you can pay for access to tickets for the next 2 years.
Well, what it was, they just did FOMO sale in advance. That's all they did. When the burn didn't happen, they just basically did FOMO in advance.
But don't you still have to pay for your tickets on top of, I think you had to pay $2,500 is what I remember, something along those lines. And then once you've paid that, you have access to tickets for the next 2 years, but still have to pay full price for the tickets.
Right. So still,
you're paying for access to buy tickets. That's crazy.
You paid FOMO. The minimum FOMO is $1,500 each, and regular ticket is $575. The main sale. I'm not sure if they gave those people DGS at $475 or steward sale at $475. I don't know. But I just had a conversation with someone about this the other day, and he's like, he bought 6 FOMOs. And he's like, man, I'd have been cheaper to pay the access because he'd have been paying for 4 years. He paid $600 a ticket less. So he'd have had his tickets for like $600 versus $1,500. So I really don't mind them doing stuff like that.
Here's the problem, though. If you're going to say it's radical, if you're going to say it's radical inclusion, and then you're going to grant access to tickets based on people having a certain amount of money, that's really strange for me to sit back and be like, oh, that's okay. Let's ignore that. Well, I've never seen another event do that.
You just didn't look close enough, buddy.
Listen, I get if Burning Man was like, hey, we're selling these very expensive tickets. Then and people want to buy it, that's one thing. But paying money so that you can then for the next 2 years have access to buy tickets on top of that blows my fucking mind. That's
obviously
crazy.
You've never been to the Bonnaroo VIP section.
No, I've only mucked it up in the mud back in like 2003 through 2007 there. So no VIP for this guy.
Yeah, I mean Bonnaroo has a VIP section. So does, what was that big festival they had up in Michigan? It's been a long time ago.
Electric Forest.
But it was the one before that. It was in that same place.
Rothbury, and then it turned to Electric Forest.
Yeah, Rothbury. So, I mean, I had a buddy at the time that was rich. He'd been out of this festival scene, old deadhead, but had a lot of money. He's like, dude, I'm going to put up the money. I want to go to some festivals, but let's do a VIP. I'm like, well, I'm usually in the muck like you. Or actually, I'm usually backstage or playing on stage. I mean, until this time, I hardly even went to festivals since I was playing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just like, okay. So I facilitate everything, and I got introduced to the VIP aspect of a lot of festivals. So really, at a lot of festivals, there's more VIP access than Burning Man even does.
Do those festivals tout decommodification and radical inclusion? Just curious. You hear what I'm saying?
I know. So, but on the other hand, you know, we just watched a documentary this morning. It was about Burning Man and what was it, Abby? 87?
I think it was
in 97, and they were barely surviving. Larry was asking for donations just to pay off the county for their bribes, And so I understand where it's coming from, that they got, and I understand it from the standpoint of running my own camp, because what I've learned is that you can't be completely socialist in your planning of your camp or your event, because I've gotten to the point in the last burn, and since the last, not burn and renegade, is that I can't keep losing money. I can't do it anymore. It's impossible. I cannot do it. I'm talking to other camp people, like, how are you surviving? And they're asking me what my structure is and how I do things and whatever. I'm like, oh, well, you're doing it wrong. I'm like, well, I ain't doing it wrong. They said, no. What they're saying is that you got to have a mix of people in your camp that can barely afford your dues if you're doing big things, okay? If you're 20 people making grilled cheeses, whatever. Go buy a fucking bunch of bread and some cheese and some butter and make grilled cheeses. That's fine. But if you do something at an insane level, like some of us do, then you got to have a mix of people who really want to work hard and can barely afford your dues. And you got to have another group of people that really will work hard for you. And it's like three bears, Oh, that's just right. I can handle that. And then you got another group of people that say, well, hell, I would have paid 3 times that. So you've got to have some people that are, in my opinion, I don't want anybody in my camp. I kicked people out of my camp this burn because they said they want to come back. I said, no, you weren't committed to the mission. You did your shift. You left. You weren't committed to the mission. Why would I want you in my camp? Sorry. Have fun. Go rave. So I'm going to have people that are committed to my mission, or they won't be back, But you got to have a mix of people who can barely afford it. Everybody works, barely afford it. And that's about right. And then I'll pay more. I'll help more. And so in a way, it's what the org is doing, right? I mean, they got people who will pay more and don't mind to pay more. And you got to look at the opportunity cost. Is some guy that makes $200,000 a year? I mean, we spent days and days organizing for main sale the other day, and we got 2 pairs out of 100 people trying. So what's their opportunity cost? I'll go ahead and pay, because, I mean, they do put that money towards art and blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, I have to say that I hear what you're saying exactly. The problem I see is, don't just act like that doesn't happen. Don't tell me that I can't even not only not pay somebody to drive in my grandma's RV, they can't even do it. Grandma has to drive it in, or she's not being self-reliant. That's bullshit.
It feels to me like Rootpile could use an OnlyFans account, and you guys could just play nude grass.
Nobody would fucking pay for that.
It's just come to the burn, right? I hear everything you're saying about the org. I guess my whole thing is it's just hard to watch them push out these 10 principles and at the same time so flagrantly not follow their own. It's just tough to watch. And I know that they have to do what they have to do. I put together events and festivals, not on the scale of Burning Man, obviously. And I know that there's a lot of moving parts, and I don't blame them for a lot of what they do. But let's drop the fucking bullshit. Let's reevaluate what these 10 principles mean and how they apply to the reality on the ground. I
agree completely. I agree actually way more than completely.
Yeah, fair enough.
And if we were having a private conversation, you would anyway. But my biggest complaint with the org actually is not any of this. My biggest complaint with the org is that theme camps build the city. Okay. As far as I'm concerned, theme camps build the city. We don't need them particularly, as Renegade Burn totally showed, but they do need us. And I really don't feel like, we're the redhead stepchild of Burning Man, because in a lot of ways they don't listen. They make decisions with no input, zero, zilcherino. There's not one single TCO on the Burning Man board, not one. In fact, last year in an interview, Marion said, someone asked her straight up on a podcast, Marion, will there ever be a theme camp organizer on the Burning Man board? Not in my lifetime. So, I mean, come on. We bust our ass. We kill ourselves. We lose money. We lose our farms. We lose our marriages. We lose everything sometimes to make this happen. And just listen to us. Don't make decisions that affect us very, directly and in a very hard way without at least getting input. It's a very interesting organization, that's for sure. I wonder sometimes why and whether I can keep doing what we do, you know. I believe in what we're doing as a camp, though. So, I mean, I think it's important. I think it's important to bring live music, and it's important to bring something that's unrepresented. And I think it's important to dispel the stereotypes the typical Burning Man attendee has about my people. I can't tell you how many people have come to camp, joined camp, or came to camp, and came up to me later and said, "Holy shit, I thought you're just a bunch of racist rednecks. Y'all are just a bunch of dope smoking hippies." I was like, I know.
Well,
so anyway, I mean, you got me on my damn soapbox. You didn't even hear me got me on the top step. You just got me like on a couple of lower steps.
Have no fear. This is only our first conversation. I would hope that you would rejoin me prior to the burn and or at the burn. I'll be there with KWPPR, Pirate Radio, and I'll come by and do some interviews and hang out. But
yeah, I got a few people in camp I want you to interview because you guys are pretty good characters in camp.
That's awesome. Andy, thank you so much for everything that you've
done,
for everything you've contributed to this experience that I value so highly. And let's talk again soon.
Let's do it.
I have a cool memory of wandering through a sea of electronic music in the circle around the man, where I was walking in between art cars and there are people everywhere lit up and they're just beats overlapping with beats overlapping with beats. And all of a sudden we come into this open area and I hear a banjo doing a G run, and we get closer and closer, and Rootpile is on their stage. It changed the trajectory of my evening. So I just wanted to mention that.
one of the reasons I do this is that my sons are both professional virtuoso bluegrass musicians. So it's the one chance a year that I get to play with my boys, on stage. And so that's real important to me. If it ever came that they couldn't go, I'm not sure I would go, I mean, it's that important to me.
Thank you for listening to Galaxy Tenants. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. For early access to episodes and exclusive content, check us out on Patreon. Also, if you'd like to communicate with us, send us an email to galaxytenants@gmail.com or leave a voicemail on the Galaxy Tenants hotline at 303-550-2065.